What if I told you the most dangerous lie is not the one that sounds evil, but the one that sounds good? Not cruel, not greedy, not obvious, necessary, responsible, moral. Because the most dangerous people rarely say, "I want power." They say, "I'm trying to do the right thing." They do not say, "I need control." They say, "Someone has to protect people." They do not say, "I benefit from your fear." They say, "I'm keeping you safe." That is the trap. The cleanest lie is the one that borrows the voice of conscience. And once a lie sounds moral, most people stop examining it. Because selfishness triggers suspicion, but virtue lowers your guard. If someone sounds arrogant, you resist. If someone sounds cruel, you step back. But if someone sounds principled, caring, responsible, sacrificial, you relax. You assume the motive is clean because the language is clean. That is how the lie gets in, not through force, through reverence. That is why the worst lies do not ask to be believed because they are true. They ask to be believed because questioning them feels wrong. And that is a higher level of control, because now the manipulator does not just want your obedience, they want your conscience. They want you to feel guilty for resisting them. That is the real move. A moral lie does not always say, "Do what I want." Sometimes it says, "A good person would not push back." That is darker, because now your decency is being used against you. And once that starts, power no longer has to overpower you. It only has to shame you. Watch how often this happens. A parent reads their child's private messages and calls it protection. A partner demands access to every password and calls it transparency. A boss humiliates you in front of a team and calls it honesty. A leader restricts dissent and calls it responsibility. A system delays justice and calls it procedure. Same structure, different costume. That is why bad actors love moral language. Because moral language gives appetite a halo. It lets control walk into the room dressed as care. It lets cruelty speak in a calm voice. It lets domination sound mature. And most people are not trained to detect that. They are trained to react to obvious evil, not polished evil, not evil with perfect wording, not evil that sounds like concern. That is why some of the most dangerous sentences in human life sound almost beautiful. This is for your own good. I had no choice. You may not understand now, but this is necessary. I'm only trying to help. Someone has to make the hard decisions. Sometimes those lines are true. That is exactly why they work as camouflage. Real care exists. Real honesty exists. Real duty exists. Real sacrifice exists. And because those things are real, they can be counterfeited. That is one of the darkest laws of power. The lie does not need to invent goodness. It only needs to wear its uniform. Remember that line. Because some people do not use virtue to become good. They use virtue to become unquestionable. That is the signature. The moment morality becomes a shield against scrutiny, it is no longer morality. It is strategy. And once you see that, a lot of human behavior becomes easier to read. The manipulator is not trying to convince you they are right. They are trying to make disagreement feel immoral. That way they do not have to win the argument. They only have to seize the ethical high ground and fire downward. Now resistance looks selfish. Questions look disrespectful. Boundaries look ungrateful. Doubt looks disloyal. That is narrative warfare. And the smartest predators are not just good at lying about facts. They are good at lying about meaning. They make fear sound wise, submission sound mature, silence sound noble, dependence sound safe. That is not communication. That is moral framing as a weapon. So stop judging people by how noble they sound. That is amateur vision. Judge them by what their words make possible. What does this language justify? Who gains power if I accept this framing? What freedom disappears if I believe this? What happens to the people around this person over time? Those questions matter more than tone ever will, because tone is cheap. Anyone can rehearse sincerity. Anyone can memorize the language of care, service, loyalty, justice, discipline, or love. But outcomes are expensive. Patterns are expensive. Reality is expensive. So look at the pattern. Does their care leave people smaller? Does their honesty only move in one direction? Does their protection require your helplessness? Does their responsibility always mean more power for them and less judgment for you? Then you're not looking at virtue. You are looking at hunger in ceremonial clothing. And that is what makes moral lies so dangerous. A selfish person may take your money. A cruel person may take your peace. But a liar dressed as virtue can take your judgment. That is the deepest theft. Because once someone captures your moral compass, they do not need to force you. You start cooperating with your own suppression. You explain away what hurts you. You defend what diminishes you. You feel ashamed for noticing the pattern. That is real control. Not when they silence you, when they make you silence yourself. And that is why this topic matters, because history is full of damage done by people who sounded righteous while doing it. Some of the worst harm in the world was carried out by people using the language of duty, order, protection, truth, responsibility, and the greater good. Not all monsters snarl. Some file paperwork, some quote principles, some speak softly, some sound like adults in the room. That is why you have to grow past being impressed by tone. A real moral person can be questioned. A fake moral person needs immunity. A real principled person accepts limits. A fake principled person uses principles as cover. A real protector helps you stand stronger. A fake protector needs you afraid enough to kneel. That is the dividing line. Cost. What is the cost of their goodness to everyone around them? Because a false virtue always leaves a trail. Smaller people, quieter people, more dependent people, more frightened people, people who feel guilty for having instincts. That is your evidence. So here is the compression point. Open evil is dangerous, but open evil still has to break the door down. A moral lie does not. It gets welcomed in. It gets defended. It gets repeated by decent people who think they are protecting something sacred. That is why the worst lies sound moral. Because virtue is not weak. Virtue is powerful. And power will always try to steal the strongest symbols it can find. So never ask only, does this sound good? Ask, what does this excuse? What does this demand? What does this make me betray in myself? Because once control learns to speak in the language of care, it becomes very hard for ordinary people to see the cage until it closes. If this made you think, subscribe for more truth, and tell me in the comments, what is more dangerous? Open cruelty or control disguised as care?